She traded herself for shelter. The scarred rancher gave her home and a future she never to dream. The wind cut sharply across the open land, carrying dust that stung her eyes and made her cough. The sun had begun to sink behind the far hills, casting long shadows over the dry fields, and she felt smaller and more exposed than ever. She had been walking for hours or maybe days. Time had lost all meaning, and each step felt heavier than the last. Her shoes were worn through, the soles barely clinging to the ground, and her thin coat did little to protect her from the biting cold. She hugged herself, trying to keep warm, trying to keep herself together. She had nowhere else to go, no one to turn to. Every town she had passed through had shown her the same faces: suspicion, judgment, and sometimes open hostility. She had learned quickly not to expect kindness from strangers. Most people didn't see the person she was inside. They only saw a girl who was tired, dirty, and scared. And maybe that was all they needed to see to turn away. Up ahead, through the haze of dust and fading light, she saw the outline of a building. It was not much, just a ranch house with weathered wood and a wide porch, but to her it looked like a castle. The sight of it made her heart skip a beat. She slowed, not trusting her own hope, afraid that it might disappear the closer she got. She had learned the hard way that hope was dangerous. It could make you careless, and carelessness could get you hurt. As she approached, she noticed the figure of a man moving around near the barn. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with hands that looked like they had worked the land for years. He carried himself with a quiet strength, and yet there was caution in the way he looked around, like he expected trouble to come at any moment. She felt a pang of fear. What if he was not kind? What if he sent her away, as everyone else had? She stopped a few steps from the porch, unsure whether to knock or to turn back into the cold night. Her stomach twisted in knots. Hunger gnawed at her insides, sharp and relentless. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and the ache made her feel weak and desperate. Her mind raced with memories she tried to push away, memories of homes that had never been safe, of people who had promised love but only delivered pain. She had run from them all, trying to find a place where she could breathe without fear. And now maybe this ranch could be that place. Finally, gathering every ounce of courage she had left, she stepped onto the porch and rapped lightly on the wooden door. The sound echoed in the quiet evening, louder than she expected. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment she thought she might run away before anyone answered. The door opened slowly, revealing the man from the yard. His eyes were wary, scanning her from head to toe. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. She swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. I need a place to stay," she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Just for the night, please." He studied her for a long moment. His face was unreadable, and she felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see every fear, every shame she carried with her. She wanted to turn away, to run and keep herself safe in the night, but something in his eyes made her pause. There was no cruelty there, no immediate judgment. Only caution and maybe concern. "Inside," he said at last. "Come in!" Relief washed over her in a wave so strong it made her knees feel weak. She followed him into the small house, stepping over the threshold as if crossing into another world. The warmth hit her immediately, a contrast to the biting cold outside. The smell of wood and faint smoke from the fireplace wrapped around her like a blanket. She wanted to cry, but she held it in, afraid that tears would betray her weakness. The rancher led her to a small room in the back, simple but clean. A bed with a thin mattress and a blanket was tucked into one corner. "You can sleep here," he said. "I'll get you some food." She nodded, words failing her again. Her hands shook slightly as she removed her coat and boots, placing them neatly by the door. She hadn't realized how tired she was until she sank onto the bed, feeling the stiffness in her body start to ease. While she rested, she noticed the rancher moving about the kitchen, preparing something to eat. The sound of pots and pans, the gentle clatter, was almost comforting. She watched from the doorway, hesitant to speak, unsure if she had the right to be here. But the way he worked, quiet, methodical, without a word of judgment, made her feel a little less like an intruder. After a few moments, he brought her a simple meal, bread, some cheese, and a cup of warm broth. She took it gratefully, her hands trembling as she ate. The food was simple, but it was the first time in days that she had felt safe enough to eat without fear. As she ate, she stole glances at the man who had given her this small mercy. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He simply existed alongside her, a steady presence in a world that had been chaotic and cruel. She wondered why he had taken her in. What made him different from all the others who had ignored her or chased her away? The night settled over the ranch slowly. The wind continued to whistle outside, rattling the windows and making shadows dance on the walls. She lay in the bed, listening to the sounds of the house, the quiet crackle of the fire, the occasional creak of floorboards, the distant lowing of cattle in the dark fields. It was foreign to her, this sense of calm, this feeling of safety, and yet it was desperately needed. Sleep came slowly, fragmented by memories she could not escape. Faces from her past flashed in her mind, some angry, some indifferent, some cruel. She had carried these memories like stones in her chest, each one adding weight to her steps, to her heart. Now, lying on this simple bed, she felt those stones beginning to shift, some even loosening. It was not relief, not yet, but it was a start. When she awoke, the sun had barely risen, painting the sky in pale pink and orange. The air was still cold, but it was softer than the night had been. She dressed quietly, trying not to wake the rancher. But when she stepped into the kitchen, he was already there, tending a small stove, humming a tune she didn't recognize. "Good morning," he said, not looking up at first. When he did, there was a faint smile, cautious but genuine. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, unsure how to explain the mixture of rest and unease she felt. Yes, thank you," she said. He nodded once and then returned to his work, leaving her to eat her breakfast in silence. There was something in that silence that felt safe, a peace she had not known in years. She realized that she had arrived at a place where she could finally begin to breathe again, even if only a little. But even in that small safety, fear lingered. She knew she could not let herself feel too secure, not yet. The world outside was still dangerous, and the people in town, neighbors, strangers, might not look kindly on her presence here. She would have to be careful, watchful, and ready. And yet, for the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt the tiniest spark of hope. Perhaps here, on this quiet ranch at the edge of a town that whispered judgment, she could find more than just shelter. Perhaps she could find a chance to live again. As she stepped outside to help with the morning chores, her heart was cautious but willing. The sun warmed her face, the wind softened, and for the first time she believed that survival might not be her only goal. There could be something more, something like home. The days at the ranch began to blend together, each morning waking to the pale light of dawn and the soft sound of animals stirring. She quickly realized that life here was not easy, but it was honest. Every task mattered. Every chore had purpose. The rancher showed her how to feed the chickens, how to water the small vegetable garden, and even how to carry heavy buckets of water without spilling. She was clumsy at first, muscles stiff from months of wandering and hunger, but she learned quickly. The rancher did not rush her, nor did he scold her when she made mistakes. Instead, he guided her with quiet patience, his presence steady and reliable like the land itself. She began to notice little things about him. The way his hands were rough but gentle when handling the animals, the way his eyes softened when he spoke to her, even when his voice was firm. There was no false kindness in him. It was simple, real, and it made her heart ache with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope, because she had never known someone to care without demanding something in return. Fear, because she wondered what she might have to give for this safety she was beginning to feel. The townspeople's whispers soon reached her ears, carried by travelers and deliveries that stopped at the ranch. "Why is that girl at the rancher's house?" they said. "She doesn't belong there." Their words were sharp, judgmental, and full of suspicion. She felt their eyes on her even when she was far away, imagining them watching every move she made. The feeling was heavy, almost suffocating, and she realized that even here, at what should have been a safe haven, she could never fully escape the world's cruelty. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fiery reds and oranges, she found herself sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. The rancher had gone to check the fences, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She thought about the life she had left behind, a life of fear, of running, of always hiding parts of herself. She thought about the future, the possibility of a life where she could breathe freely without constant worry. But with that thought came a question she could not answer. At what cost would this life come? Her mind wandered to the nights before she had found the ranch, nights filled with cold floors, empty stomachs, and the harsh words of strangers who had judged her before knowing her. She shivered, not just from the evening chill, but from the memory of helplessness. The ranch had given her warmth, food, and shelter, but she could not ignore the uneasy feeling that some sort of bargain had been made, unspoken, yet palpable. The rancher returned from checking the fences, brushing dust from his hands and loosening the worn strap of his hat. He carried a calm presence that seemed to settle the restless energy in the air. "Everything looks fine," he said simply, as if the world outside the ranch did not exist. She hesitated before speaking, words caught between gratitude and fear. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to repay you." He shrugged lightly, not meeting her eyes. "You don't have to repay me," he said. "Just stay safe, do what you can to help around here." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her heart skip. He expected nothing beyond effort, yet his trust felt heavy and unfamiliar. Over the next few weeks, their daily routines became a rhythm she began to rely on. She rose with the sun, worked with the animals, helped with chores, and slowly began to find pride in her abilities. She was not perfect, far from it, but each small task completed without error gave her a sense of accomplishment she had not known for years. And in those moments, she felt a tiny spark of self-worth igniting inside her. Yet, as her confidence grew, so did her awareness of the delicate balance she lived in. The townspeople's gossip was relentless, and their judgmental eyes always seemed to find her. Sometimes, when she walked into town for supplies, she felt the weight of every stare. Mothers pulled their children closer, men averted their gaze, and whispers followed her down the streets. It was a painful reminder that safety at the ranch could not fully shield her from the world's harshness. One afternoon, while gathering eggs from the chicken coop, she accidentally dropped a basket, scattering eggs across the ground. She froze, heart pounding, waiting for the rancher's voice to scold her. But instead, he approached calmly, bending to help gather the broken and unbroken eggs. "Mistakes happen," he said simply. "What matters is that you try again." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. For so long, no one had ever spoken to her like that. She was used to anger, to harsh words, to blame. But here, even in failure, she was met with patience. It was confusing, almost frightening to feel safe when she had been trained to expect punishment. That night, as she lay in the small room he had offered her, she reflected on their interactions. The rancher did not ask about her past, yet he seemed to understand it in quiet ways. He did not offer pity, yet his actions spoke of care. She wondered why he had taken her in, why he chose to trust someone the world had already judged harshly. She wanted to ask, but words felt too heavy, too vulnerable. Instead, she held her questions close, letting time reveal answers, slowly, if at all. Days turned into weeks, and she began to form a fragile bond with the land itself. The routines, the chores, the rising and setting sun, they became a language she could understand. Every morning, she felt a little stronger, a little braver. The rancher noticed too, though he rarely commented directly, instead showing approval through small nods or quiet acknowledgement. His trust in her was unspoken but undeniable, and it was a gift more valuable than she had imagined. But trust was not easy. Late at night, she sometimes woke in a cold sweat, haunted by memories she could not shake. The past had a way of creeping in, of reminding her that safety was fragile, that life could change in an instant. She feared that one mistake, one wrong move could cost her the only place where she had begun to feel human again.
One evening, as the wind howled outside and rain began to patter softly against the roof, the rancher found her sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames.
"You've been quiet today," he said gently, sitting across from her. "Everything all right?" She hesitated, then shook her head.
I'm just thinking," she admitted. "About everything."
"About before and now." He nodded, understanding in his eyes.
It's normal, he said. The past doesn't just leave.
"You carry it with you. But you're not alone anymore." The words made her chest ache. Not alone. For so long she had been utterly alone. Now someone had given her space to heal, to breathe, to begin again. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. As the weeks continued, the bond between her and the rancher grew quietly, without words. They worked side by side, shared small meals, and sometimes just sat in silence, listening to the wind and the animals. There was a comfort in these moments, a sense of stability she had never known. And yet she could not forget the town's whispers, the judgmental stares, or the lingering fear that her presence here was fragile, conditional, and constantly under scrutiny. One morning, while tending the garden, she heard voices from the road leading to the ranch. A group of townspeople had come, their expressions curious and skeptical. She froze, unsure what to do. The rancher stepped forward calmly, his voice carrying over the distance. "They're here!" he said quietly, as if reading her mind. "Don't worry! Just stay with me!" The townspeople's questions were cautious, their tone laced with suspicion. "Why is she here?" one asked. "Does she belong on your ranch?" He answered simply, without anger or defensiveness. "She's working! She's learning! And she's welcome here." Their surprise was evident. They had expected excuses, judgments, or blame. Instead, they were met with truth and steadiness. Slowly, their questions dwindled and they left, still whispering but unable to shake the certainty in his words. After they departed, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The world outside might always be critical, but here, at the ranch, there was a space where she could exist without fear. And slowly, she began to believe that maybe she could be more than what the world had told her she was. Maybe she could grow, heal, and find a life she had never imagined. The days grew longer, and with each sunrise, she felt herself changing in ways she had not thought possible. Life on the ranch was demanding, but it was honest and grounding. She began to wait before the sun, stepping quietly into the crisp morning air to help with chores. The rhythm of life, the feeding of animals, repairing fences, tending the small garden, became a comfort. Each task she completed brought a sense of pride that she had never experienced before. She was not just surviving, she was learning to live. The rancher noticed her progress, though he rarely commented. His approval came in small gestures, a nod when she finished a task well, a quiet smile when she handled the animals with care, or the way he entrusted her with small responsibilities. It was more than guidance, it was trust. And trust, she realized, was something she had been denied for most of her life. It was fragile, yet here it was, offered freely, and it both scared and encouraged her. Despite the peace of the ranch, life outside remained harsh. The whispers from the town continued, carried by passing travelers or neighbors who came to sell supplies. Some townspeople refused to look at her. Others whispered openly, their voices dripping with judgment. It was a reminder that safety at the ranch was not complete. Even here, she could never fully escape the scrutiny of a world that had been cruel to her for too long. She carried this awareness like a weight, one that never truly left her. One afternoon, while collecting firewood, she accidentally tripped over a hidden rock, scattering the wood across the ground. The rancher, who had been checking the fence nearby, hurried over to help her. She felt a flush of embarrassment rise in her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, bending to gather the logs. He shook his head. "Don't worry about it," he said gently. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that you try again."
It was such a simple thing, but it filled her with warmth.
For so long she had been met with anger or punishment for mistakes, no matter how small. Here, mistakes were part of learning, part of living. Slowly, she began to believe that she could belong somewhere, that she could have a place in the world that was not defined by fear or shame. Over time, the bond between her and the rancher deepened. They rarely spoke of the past, and he never asked about the things she had endured. But in small ways, she could see that he understood. The way he moved around the ranch, always careful not to overwhelm her. The small gestures of kindness, the quiet patience, they spoke volumes. And in turn, she began to trust him more, not just as a protector, but as someone who saw her as more than the mistakes or judgments of her past. Yet trust was complicated. She could feel the unspoken burden hovering between them, subtle but undeniable. He had offered her safety, food, and shelter, and though he had never demanded anything beyond effort and honesty, she could not shake the feeling that she owed him more than work. Sometimes in quiet moments alone, she worried that her presence might be seen as a burden, that any misstep could undo the fragile peace she had found. One night, a storm swept across the land, dark clouds rolling in, heavy rain hammering against the roof, and wind rattling the windows. She lay awake, listening to the storm, heart racing. The animals in the barn panicked, and she could hear their distressed sounds through the walls. The rancher moved quickly, checking the animals, securing doors and gates, and making sure nothing was harmed. She wanted to help, but feared she would slow him down. Finally, he called her, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "I need your help with the barn," he said. Her heart pounded as she grabbed a lantern and followed him. The wind whipped against her face, rain soaking her clothes, but she did not falter. Together they secured the animals, moved equipment, and patched weak spots in the barn. Her muscles ached, her hands were raw, but a surge of determination pushed her forward. For the first time, she felt like she was truly contributing, truly part of this place. After the storm passed, they sat on the porch, drenched but alive. She felt a rush of pride mixed with exhaustion. "I didn't know I could do that," she admitted quietly. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "And you've learned more in these weeks than most people do in months." Those words settled deep inside her. Strength. She had always thought of herself as weak, fragile, and broken, but here, in the aftermath of a storm, she could see that she was resilient. She could endure, adapt, and survive. And perhaps, one day, she could even thrive. The days continued, each one teaching her something new, not just about the ranch, but about herself. She learned patience, the value of steady work, and the quiet satisfaction of doing something with care and attention. She learned that trust could be given and earned, that kindness did not always come with a price, and that people could surprise you with their quiet strength. Yet she could not ignore the lingering fear in her heart. The town's judgment still weighed on her, and she worried about the limits of the rancher's patience. What if they grew tired of her presence? What if one day she was forced to leave the only place she had ever felt safe? These thoughts haunted her, but she did not speak them aloud. Instead, she focused on the work, on small victories, on moments of connection that slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to rebuild her sense of self. One afternoon, as she tended the garden, she overheard voices from the nearby road. A group of townspeople had come, their expressions wary and curious. Her stomach tightened, and she froze, unsure what to do. The rancher noticed immediately, his voice calm but firm. "Stay here," he said. "Don't come out until I call you." She watched from the porch as he greeted the visitors, answering their questions with quiet confidence. They asked why she was there, whether she belonged on the ranch, and if he could trust her. He answered simply, without anger or defensiveness, explaining that she was learning, working, and contributing. She felt a swell of relief as the townspeople finally nodded, some still whispering but unable to challenge his words. For the first time, she realized that her place at the ranch was not just about the rancher's kindness. It was also about her own efforts, her willingness to learn and grow. She had earned her presence not through perfection but through persistence and care. That evening, she sat by the fire, reflecting on everything she had experienced in the past weeks. The fear that had clung to her like a shadow was still there, but it had loosened slightly. She had faced challenges, weathered storms, and survived judgment, all while learning to trust and be trusted in return. Slowly, she felt a shift inside herself. a quiet confidence beginning to take root. She realized that she was no longer the same person who had arrived at the ranch weeks ago. Fearful, broken, and unsure. She was stronger, braver, and more capable than she had ever believed. And though the world outside might remain harsh, she had discovered a place where she could grow, heal, and begin to imagine a future she had never dared to dream of. The bond between her and the rancher remained quiet but deepening. They did not speak of love or romance. Their connection was simpler yet profound. It was a bond built on trust, mutual respect, and the shared understanding of what it meant to survive. In his presence, she learned that safety could exist without control, that kindness could exist without expectation, and that a life of dignity was possible even after hardship. And though the shadows of her past still lingered, they were no longer all-consuming. With each day, she found more strength, more hope, and a growing belief that she could face whatever challenges came next. The ranch, the animals, the simple rhythm of life, they were teaching her to live again, not just survive. And in that lesson, she found a freedom she had never known before. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a warm, golden glow across the fields. She woke to the familiar sounds of the animals, the soft cluck of chickens, the lowing of cows, and the gentle hum of life that had become her new rhythm. The morning air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of earth and grass, a smell that felt like home. She stretched, feeling her muscles ache from the work of yesterday, but in a way that made her feel alive and capable. Over the weeks, she had grown stronger, more confident, and more self-reliant. She moved through the chores with a sense of purpose, noticing how her hands were steady now, how her back had grown strong, and how her mind was sharper. The simple tasks of life on the ranch had become lessons, teaching her patience, responsibility, and pride. She no longer felt like a fragile girl at the mercy of the world. She was someone who could take care of herself and contribute meaningfully. The bond between her and the rancher had deepened further. They rarely spoke of the past, yet a quiet understanding existed between them. He trusted her, relied on her, and often left small tasks for her to manage independently. And she, in turn, trusted him, not just as a protector, but as a steady presence in a world that had often been unpredictable and cruel. The unspoken connection gave her comfort, and she found herself slowly letting go of some of the fear she had carried for so long. But the world outside the ranch had not forgotten her. One morning, a messenger arrived from the town bringing news of a problem that required her immediate attention. A neighbor's fence had broken, letting animals wander dangerously close to the road, and someone had seen her nearby. The townspeople were talking, questioning why she was at the ranch, and some of their voices carried judgment and suspicion. Her heart sank, but the rancher placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Go," he said. "Do what you can. I'll handle the rest. They will see what kind of person you are if you let your actions speak." With determination, she made her way to the broken fence, working quickly to secure the loose boards. Sweat ran down her face, but she ignored it, focusing on the task. She moved with care, double-checking each post and latch, ensuring that nothing was left to chance.
Passers-by watched, whispering, but she no longer felt the crushing weight of fear.
Her focus was on the work, on the animals, on proving to herself that she belonged here not because someone had taken pity on her, but because she had earned her place through effort and courage. When the fence was finally repaired, she stood back to admire her work. The animals were safe, and the structure was solid. For the first time, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She had faced not only the physical challenge of the task, but also the mental challenge of judgment and fear, and she had succeeded. Returning to the ranch, she found the rancher waiting, a faint smile on his face. "You did well," he said simply. "I knew you could." The praise was more than words. It was validation, a recognition of her growth and strength. For so long she had doubted herself, believing that she was fragile and incapable. But now, with every small victory, she saw the truth. She was resilient, capable, and deserving of respect. The days continued in a similar rhythm, each one building on the last. She learned to ride the horses, care for sick animals, and manage small repairs around the property. Each skill brought with it a growing sense of independence. The rancher encouraged her, offering guidance when needed but never overstepping, allowing her to discover her own strength and confidence. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon together, she spoke softly, her voice carrying a mix of awe and gratitude.
"I never thought I could feel safe," she admitted, "or that I could have a future that felt real, but now I think I can."
The rancher nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "You've worked hard for this," he said. "You've earned it, and you deserve it." Her heart swelled with a feeling she had not known in years. Hope. It was fragile, delicate, but undeniable. She allowed herself to imagine a future where she was not running, not hiding, not afraid. A future where she could make choices, pursue dreams, and live with dignity. But life on the ranch was not without challenges. One day, a sudden illness swept through the animals, leaving her and the rancher racing against time to care for them.
She worked tirelessly, mixing medicines, tending wounds, and comforting the frightened creatures. The experience tested her patience, her knowledge, and her emotional strength.
There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, on the verge of tears, but the rancher's calm presence reminded her to keep going. Together they managed to nurse the animals back to health. Through these challenges, she learned resilience, not just in herself, but in others. She saw how the rancher handled difficulty with quiet determination, how he faced obstacles without panic, and how kindness and patience could coexist with strength. These lessons became part of her, shaping her into someone capable of facing adversity without losing herself. As the seasons changed, the ranch began to thrive under their care. Crops grew strong, animals were healthy, and the home felt alive with warmth and life. The town's perception of her shifted slowly too. Those who had once whispered now observed quietly, some with curiosity, some with reluctant respect. She realized that the world's judgment, while persistent, could not define her. Her actions, her choices, and her courage had created a reality that was stronger than rumor or suspicion. One crisp morning she walked through the fields, feeling the wind in her hair and the sun on her face. She paused to watch the animals graze, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of peace that was not fleeting or fragile.
This place, these people, the life she had built, this was real. And she had earned it. The rancher joined her silently, standing beside her as they watched the day begin.
No words were needed. Their bond was evident in the quiet shared between them. It was not a bond born of dependency or pity, but of mutual respect, trust, and understanding.
They had both faced hardship, yet here they were, standing together, stronger for it. She smiled to herself, thinking about how far she had come. She had arrived at the ranch broken, fearful, and unsure of her worth. Now she was confident, capable, and filled with a sense of purpose.
Her scars remained, both visible and invisible, but they no longer defined her. They were marks of survival, of resilience, of a life she had fought to reclaim. In the evening, she sometimes sat by the fire reflecting on her journey. She thought of the storms she had faced, the judgment she had endured, and the moments of doubt that had threatened to overwhelm her. And she thought of the rancher, whose quiet patience, steady guidance, and unwavering trust had given her the chance to rebuild herself. She felt gratitude deeper than words could express, a feeling of connection that transcended the spoken language. As the days passed, she began to dream, not just of survival, but of growth. She imagined expanding the garden, caring for more animals, and even one day helping others who were as lost and afraid as she had been. The ranch had given her a home, but it had also given her something more valuable: hope.
The hope that life could be more than fear, more than hardship, more than judgment. The hope that she could create a future of her own choosing.
And one quiet evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink over the rolling hills, she felt a sense of calm she had never known. She had faced storms, fear, and doubt, and she had survived. She had built a life, earned respect, and discovered strength she did not know she possessed. The rancher stood beside her, silently watching the horizon, and for the first time she felt certain that the life ahead, whatever it held, was hers to shape.
Her past would always be a part of her, but it no longer controlled her. She was free, not because the world had given her freedom, but because she had fought for it, earned it, and embraced it. The ranch, the animals, the work, and the quiet bond with the rancher had transformed her life, giving her not just shelter, but a future she had never dared to dream. She breathed deeply, feeling the wind carry the scent of grass, earth, and freedom.
For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine happiness, not fleeting or conditional, but real and lasting. She had found her place, her strength, and her home.
And in that realization, she felt a quiet joy that filled her heart with warmth, hope, and endless possibility. The ranch was more than shelter now. It was life, love, and hope made real. And she, once lost and broken, had become someone who could stand tall, face the world, and build a future that was truly hers.